You're listening to the Missionary Perspective Podcast with veteran missionaries Erik Johnson and Joshua Mead. We're glad you could join us. We trust this podcast will be both a blessing and a challenge as we relate topics in world evangelism from a missionary perspective. Now, here's Josh and Erik.
Welcome to the Missionary Perspective Podcast. Erik, it's been a while since you and I have got on together and actually done an episode. So I'm looking forward to this catch-up episode, just getting back together, talking about what we've been up to over the past couple months. You just hosted one of my favorite missionaries, J.B. Godfrey, who still has an influence here in Senegal to this day, even though he was a missionary here some 30 plus years ago. How was your experience with J.B. Godfrey? Then what have you been up to?
Well, good to see you, Josh. I've been at the beach a long time. No, that's actually a joke. I haven't been to the beach in over a year. Our family was talking about lamenting that. But no, one of the reasons is we've been hosting some great missionaries and great pastors. And man, as I mentioned, if you haven't gone back and listened to the 3 podcasts we did, I did a personal interview with Dr. J.B. Godfrey, as well as 2 sessions at a mini field conference we held. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But boy, for me, it was one of the highlights of the year, one of the highlights of our missions times here, hosting Dr. Godfrey, Miss Godfrey. Miss Godfrey got to come as well, which was just a terrific blessing having both of them. Now, these are 2 people who are now in their 70s. But boy, you wouldn't know it. They travel. They have no restrictions. They are ready to go. They woke up earlier in the morning, had their coffee. They were ready to go before I was in the morning. These people were downstairs reading their Bibles. And we spent most of the day listening to great missionary stories, just like you thought it would be, is how it was. It was morning, noon, and night, just great mission stories. And though I did, originally my plan was to have Dr. Godfrey in to speak at our church here, where I would translate. He would do our missions faith promise emphasis, which went terrific. But really, the main reason I wanted to have Dr. Godfrey and Miss Godfrey, if she could come, was into our home. I wanted our children to spend time with them. They had never met them. Ironically enough, we know a lot of their kids, their grandkids, real well, especially Brandon and Benita Lawrence. And then, of course, their kids are very good kids, friends with my kids. And so they know their family, but they've heard stories of Dr. JB, but they never really got to know him and meet him. And so having him in our home, if you've talked to Dr. Godfrey or listened to him for about 5 minutes, you realize he doesn't emphasize the negative, or he'll take the negative and make it into a funny story. And we heard a lot of stories, and so many of them were, I told my children after they left, because my son Tyler likes to write stories and he really loves movies. I said, Tyler, you need to write the movie script for Dr. J.B. Godfrey's life. I was like, this life needs to be a movie. We need to encourage young people in missions by the experiences this family's had. Not all great experiences, but just how the Lord's worked it out. So for us, it was truly a highlight. And then the last day he was with us, our new director, Brother Benji Dryden, who's now the Caribbean director for us, came down with his wife, and we hosted what we call a mini field conference. Many times BIMI has field conferences in different areas, and we hadn't had one in a while. So we had a one-day event there hosted at our church. We're kind of centrally located in the island, and all the BIMI missionaries that could came, and some other missionaries like-minded, and had a bunch of sessions with Dr. Godfrey, Brother Dryden. Which was really neat about Brother Dryden. He grew up here on the island, on the other side of the island in Haiti. He came to the island when he was 18 months old, grew up, went to college, was in America for a few years, and then came back for over 20 years as a missionary. So he spent almost his entire life on the island. So he had a unique perspective to speak to the missionary kids for a session. And so for our kids, that was really special. So having Dr. JB was a highlight. What about you? I've been watching Instagram and watching Facebook. I've seen a lot of constructing going on. What's the new year been like for you?
It's been very busy. We've had a couple teams that came over to help us with some of the construction. We've been in the final stages of phase 1 of our construction project. And one of the things I love about being a missionary, and it's not for everybody's got a different personality, right? But what I enjoy about here is that you got to be flexible and you can have a plan. Plans don't always go according to the way you like it to, or you think it'll plan out. But a big part of being a missionary is being flexible with those plans. And what we thought would be phase one of our building project turns out that's going to be a later phase. And then we kind of revamped where our construction is, but we were able to put up a church building, and we also on the same property we have an apartment we constructed, and then we have a large chicken coop that we put up so that whoever that the prayer is, we seem to you have a vision, and then I think it's always good to plan for God to fulfill what you believe God is leading you to do. I think I've been doing some online college courses recently, and I think one of our upcoming episodes, we're going to talk about furthering your education as a missionary on the mission field. But one of my courses, I had to pick a character from influential in in Baptist history. So I chose William Carey, and of course, he made the statement: expect great things from God, attempt great things for God, which actually isn't a phrase he said. It was more that it was 2 points of a message. When you put it together, it gives you a good saying
better
there. Yeah, but the point is, when we launched into this construction project, a lot of the vision is not yet fulfilled. Like we put up a building knowing that we need somebody to care for the property. We'll need a caretaker. We need somebody to come and partner with Malik, the lead pastor of our church, in the ministry. And so we've prepared a place to receive, whether it's a single guy or a couple where the husband feels led into full-time ministry, whatever the case may be, whoever God will send, we're preparing to receive them. And so we are very excited about how the Lord is going to use this property. We already had one service out there a week ago, and the church was already half full. And we had a wonderful time out there with the church family and some guests that were able to come out and join us for that opening service. And we're very excited about what God is doing here, the doors that the Lord is opening. And so, yeah, a lot of the past few months have been taken up with a lot of construction, doing the final stages of the building project, as well as some preparation for some other projects we have, not just here in our city, but throughout the country and even in Gambia. So we can talk about that in a minute. But
I think that's exciting. In fact, while you were talking and sharing that vision, I got a seed plant for another podcast that I think is really important. And it's probably only comes as you have more years and more gray hair like we do, at least I do, is that once you learn a culture, you tend to understand certain parts of the culture where people need to provide for their families, and understanding the lack of dependence on American missions or North American missions, and how that can look for each individual. I mean, like the idea of having a chicken coop or building a pastorum or a piece of on the property, a place for a person, a caretaker to stay. I mean, those are kind of things that if you read our church planning manuals, those aren't really in there, and a lot of times they're specific to the area. Where we are, all three of the ministries we're working on, I have different ideas. One of the areas is like, we helping them try to get solar power so that because the price of power here for energy is very expensive, and making that investment for the future for the church, so they never have to pay that, and can take that investment. And so I think that's something for the future that, being forward thinking, not just with property, with training and seminary, but even provision that will make it where the pastor doesn't have to be completely bivocational. In many cases, they have to be. So anyway, that's totally all on the side. But one of the things I'm still kind of glowing from is that yesterday in our church, and I'll rewind a little bit, about 3.5 weeks ago, we had our youth camp during what we call spring break. And this year we took our largest group. We even took not only our sister churches, we helped start another church planner. We're helping out about an hour away, took some teenagers. So we had a group of 24, 25 people on a bus heading to camp. And we were going to the mountains about an hour away. Now, we had gone to the same town for youth camp, but in a much more rustic setting. This was a more very developed, very nice, we might even say North American style camp. Young Life had built it. I'm sure it cost several hundreds of thousands, not $1 million to develop. So, but it could host hundreds of teenagers. But we ran the camp. Actually, some fellow missionaries, like-minded missionaries, ran the camp. We came along with our teenagers, and it was awesome. We've done camp before. Now, one of the things is for 16 years, a lot of times when Holly and I want to do something, normally we have to plan it and run it. This was like the first time in 16 years that somebody did it, and we were just kind of participating. And boy, it was wonderful. But the most important part wasn't just the beautiful setting, which it wasn't just that somebody else kind of handled the preaching and the teaching and the games, and we just kind of came along as leaders and got to spend time with our teenagers. But was really to see how our kids responded. It was amazing to see how many of our kids, a few of them got saved. Others maybe we might say a rededication to the Lord, a confirmation of their salvation, and even a couple who are now feeling called into ministry. And then as mountaintop literally experience that was, as we came down, we always know, and if you've ever been to camp, sometimes that first week there's an adjustment, but to see how much our teenagers are even more on fire. So yesterday, fast forward 3 weeks, we had yesterday our youth service where the youth literally did the whole service, from opening prayer to reading the scripture to leading the music to doing Sunday school to giving testimonies to making the video presentation for what happened at camp and announcements, everything. And so, boy, I was very excited. In fact, a proud papa. My boys led the music and did Sunday school, so that was great for me. But I literally actually had a button on my coat pop. So I don't know if that was figuratively and literally, but it's literally happened at the same time. Maybe a situation my diet changed too that I need to do. But it was so exciting to hear the testimonies, especially of some of the kids who don't have parents who make them go to church and who don't go to our church. And to hear about how God used the preaching of this young national preacher, Dominican, to just work in their lives, and that it's still 3 weeks later something very special in their lives. So we're praying that kind of revival, even the youth group, continues. And so that's exciting whenever that happens, whatever church you're in.
Yeah, that is very exciting to hear. And it is neat to see the different stages of development in different countries where missions is being done. You were mentioning just that aspect of sometimes on the mission field, you need to consider what needs to be structured, like, chicken coop and things like that, in order to sustain the ministry. And other countries, there's the sustainabilities already in place. There's a structure for each family to support themselves as you win them to Christ. One thing you mentioned, and I thought maybe we'd chat about this for a second, because it got me thinking, is it one of the things you said was this year going to the youth group, the youth camp, there was less that you had to do. In the past, you had to do everything. You and Holly had to plan everything and every little detail.
Yes.
Would you say does this accurately describe, I guess, the trajectory of missions and the way missions is supposed to be done? And I think it's applicable maybe in any field of work. But would you say the less involved you are in the minor details of planning, the more is being accomplished? And I think, is that a good thing?
Good question. That's a good question. I think certainly early on, we understood that if we didn't probably plan it, it wouldn't happen. I think obviously, yeah.
I guess what I mean by it is the fact that you don't have to be as involved in all the little details of planning everything and every activity. It means there's more people serving the Lord, engaged in doing the work. And I think to me, that's an exciting thing when at the start you're doing everything, and then you reach a point where I don't think it's a point where you're less busy. You're still busy in the work. Right. It's just those nitty gritty details that you're less involved in, those nitty gritty details. And I think that's a good thing because it's a sign that more is being accomplished because you can't do everything.
No. Well, no, you're 100% right. And I would guess that most missionaries who keep themselves busy, the hardest thing to do and the thing that we probably, the top five of our deficits, our problems are, lack of delegation. And so, no, there's certainly, that's certainly true. And even yesterday, though, I kind of joked to the congregation, I'm taking the day off, and letting the teenagers do it. We actually, obviously worked very hard to help them prepare, but mentally it was very nice to have all the details taken care of. And I will be honest to say, like, we're taking off on a furlough here in a few weeks, and I will work very hard to put things in people's hands. But you know I've known that reality forever, and we do entrust it to people for months at a time. But you're right, when we're here, we're just we're control freaks, we're Americans. And so it is absolutely true that the more we put in other people's hands, oftentimes we see more benefit. And we're truly, we know that as missionaries. We've preached it here on the podcast, and unfortunately, sometimes you just don't always implement it. But when it happens and you're excited to see the fruit of it, you want to glorify the Lord about it.
Absolutely. So you mentioned your furlough is coming up. Remind us, what does a furlough look like for the
Mhm.
Johnson family?
Well, we're in a unique situation. We mentioned this before, so I won't belabor the point, but we're in a stage in life where my mother-in-law is in some memory loss issues and, cognitive decline. And so about 5 years ago, we kind of came to this reality, and we talked to our pastor, and he's been all for us coming back for quicker, shorter furloughs, usually 6, 7 weeks at a time. We found, for the most part, it's worked better in the summers not to change the kids' schedule. And there'll also be a time in between that time that I send Holly home by herself to spend time with her family. And this has been a blessing. We're thankful. Right now, Mom still remembers us very well. We had a very sweet conversation with them on FaceTime last night. And so we really block out time to go spend time with family for a couple weeks, both up north and down south. And then all around it, we're visiting churches. And it's been a great pattern. It's not a pattern that works for everybody, but it works for us. We are very blessed here at the church to have many leaders who we just say, this is when we're going to come back, pick us up at the airport. And they're able to, have people doing Sunday school and leading music and preaching. And so that's what furlough looks like for us after 16 years. It wasn't always that way.
Sure.
But now we're very thankful to be able to leave it in very capable hands and go see family. And you know, we're also blessed that we live close enough where that's a financial possibility. I think if we lived
Mhm.
a situation where $2,000-3,000 a ticket, that wouldn't be something we could do every year. But usually, if I look long and hard, I can get pretty good deals, and we're very thankful for that.
No, that's very good. And we are even this summer. My wife and kids are going back in just 2 weeks. They're going to go back for a summer trip. I'll join them. What is it? I think 6 weeks from now. We have a church plant that we're going to partner with the local church in
Amen.
the Gambia. So we're going to go down there. I'll be going down there, spend a week or so helping train some of the men to get them set up, and this will be our first church plant that's in conjunction with the seminar. So every year
Nice.
we do about four seminars throughout the country, including the Gambia. And we try to target strategic locations where there are established churches, churches that are of like faith, but churches where there are believers and church leaders who really desire to engage the Islamic population, whether it's the Wolof ethnicity or the Fulani ethnicity, really engage them contextually with the gospel. And so we've had a great turnout for a lot of our seminars, and part of what we want to do with our seminars is not only ultimately see people saved and churches started, we want to network with believers of like faith and like practice so that with our extensive media outreach, which continues to grow, it it blows my mind just the reach and expanse that the impact you can make using media when it's done correctly, and especially in the Islamic world, in the context of Islam, it's still such an effective means of making and engaging that initial Muslim with the gospel. And
Hmm.
then we're really at a place now where we are seeing people saved in all parts of the country, and not just the country, but all over the continent of Africa, all throughout North Africa, countries where we can't even go as a missionary openly. Brother Godfrey, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to the
Hmm.
episode, but he mentioned they landed in a country where they're not allowed to share the gospel. Well, we are. I couldn't go. You still to this day can't go to this particular country
Wow.
and share the gospel, but our videos are widely shared among people in that country. And we had a gentleman
Wow.
come down and we did some recording with him recently. And he told us that the underground church up there is using the resources and production that we're doing to evangelize believers in this country. And so part of what
Mm.
we're doing with our seminars is we'll bring these guys in from countries that we can't even go to as missionaries, give them further training, network with existing believers, train them how to do evangelism one-on-one, and help them start churches. A lot of times, the most effective way to engage and start a new church, even where there's an existing church, is to not invite the Muslim contacts to your church, because the way most churches are structured in their tradition and the way they do church, and nothing wrong with it. And again, this can be another, another episode talking about contextualization. But a lot of times, the way that church is done is very foreign to our Muslim friends, and
Hmm.
it just they would say, well, this just isn't for me. Whereas if we can engage a contact on a one-on-one, a Bible study in a home, maybe renting a storefront somewhere where we can meet. And so we're providing resources for these men to engage and lead these Bible studies. And then we put them in touch with contacts that we make online. And so as a result of these seminars and our media outreach, we're networking with different church leaders and missionary and pastors and church members. And then from there, we're seeing churches started. Like in Gambia, we're going to be launching a church plant there. This summer, Malik, who is the lead pastor of our church, he's going down to the Casamance, which is southern Senegal, where there are several families and a couple villages who have become Christian. And he's going down there to do some discipleship and do some initial evaluation of how we can help them form a church and get a church plant started. So we're very, very excited just to see where God is leading. And because I'll be traveling a little bit this coming month, my family's going to go back. Our kids are going to go to camp there in the States. You have the blessing of having a great network of churches and established camps and activities that your family can be involved in. We're pretty much still in the Wild West here, and a lot of it is
Absolutely.
still, a lot of development left to be done in the country here. And in fact, the city we live in, there's another wonderful missionary family that lives here. They just moved here and they're doing a tremendous job doing the work of the Lord here and engaging people with the gospel and things like that. But um, pretty much anybody that our kids were close to, that we connected with, there's just nobody here anymore. And so
Yeah.
they'll be going back, enjoy some time with family over the summer, and then I'll be doing some traveling and helping to expand the ministry of what God is doing here. So we're excited about all that's in store.
Well, and you hit on something that I think we learn with age, and it's always a balance. But that, and we've talked on other episodes, but finding that balance of how to fulfill the calling God's given you, how to have that vision and how to implement that in the long haul, but not sacrificing your family. I think sending your kids back to camp, if you can make it work. The world's smaller now; you can get around easier.
Mhm.
It just makes so much sense, especially when you don't have that luxury that we did this past year. Now, my kids are spoiled. They're actually going to go to summer camp in the States as well, and they're very excited about that. God made an amazing opportunity for them as well. So, and they know that they're
Awesome.
very spoiled. Spoiled is not the right word, but they're very blessed, and they know that. But those are those are sacrifices we as parents want to make, especially for the spiritual side of it, where,
Mhm.
we know the decisions you can make at camp, and we want our kids to make those same kinds of decisions where God can direct their lives. And so that makes me very, very full of joy to hear that. And I pray that they have a safe and wonderful, very great trip back. And with that in mind, I was thinking about missionaries and fellowship, and you mentioned how you have just so little of that. We've had ebbs and flows at different times here in the missionary and the missions experience here in the Dominican, where we've had more families sometimes. But right now, as I mentioned, having Dr. Godfrey come and just, one of the reasons we decided to have this mini field conference here is that when I got thinking, he had a pretty unique relationship with just about all the missionaries here. At different
Okay.
times, he's gotten to know them. I could just tell when he would read his Moments for Missions and he would read my friend's prayer letters. I was like, he knows them pretty well. And when we decided to have him in, I said, we should just, instead of, they're 70 plus years old, instead of drive them all over the island, which is not always easy, just have them come
Sure.
here and spend time with them. And that's kind of where it came from. And we had just a tremendous time. We played games. We had testimony time. We sang together. And, I think as you become, maybe there's a missionary listening to this now, it does take effort to plan, but when you're able to do something or encourage maybe two or three other missionaries to brainstorm with you, for our kids, that's some of the highlights they have is spending time with
Yeah.
missionary kids. And so I want to encourage a missionary who's listening there, maybe sometimes God has given you the ability to organize things. Don't don't be lazy. If you can be a blessing to someone, and we're glad we did it. And it was so much fun having the missionaries here. There was actually we didn't plan this. There was another missionary couple. They're not with BIMI, but a like-minded group, and they are on their survey trip. They were on their survey trip, and they came with another missionary and got to sit in and hear, 50 years of experience from JB
Yeah.
and 20 to 30 years experience from the Drydens, and then other missionaries. And there were some new missionaries on the way. And I thought, wow, that was really helpful for them. They're going to go back. They're going to have a true perspective of what missions life's going to be like and what the end goal can be as well. And I think as we become veteran old missionaries, that's the kind of legacies we can leave behind too, is helping these other missionaries have a true idea of what mission life can be, and to have real true fellowship.
You're right. And, circling back, mentioning leaving a legacy and being encouraging to younger missionaries. I want to circle back to something you said at the beginning, which is really one of the characteristics of the Godfreys is just like you said, he even finds joy in the negative things. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
the missionaries and the leaders in ministry that impact us the most are the men who still find joy, who still laugh, who love life, and under the surface they have suffered, they have
Mm-hmm.
gone through the ringer no more or less than you or I have, and
Oh
yet
yeah.
they've come out and have endured. And a big part of that is just not focusing on the negative.
Yeah.
And I so appreciate not JB Godfrey, not just him, men like Don Sisk and other men that you meet on as you travel on furlough and as you encounter. You could tell a missionary who's just had a sour experience. If he focuses on the negative, then it impacts him when you're older, and that also kind of it hinders your influence when you're older too. And the thing is, most missionaries have gone through the same routine of ups and downs. It's the missionary, I think, that endures with joy and gladness of heart and finds the good even in the negative. That's where I think you'll find as you get older and hairs get a little gray, or in my case, your hair starts thinning out, whatever the case may be. It's
What would you
it's
rather have,
maintaining.
less hair or gray hair?
I'll take the gray. I take the gray. But yeah, so yeah, I would say that don't just learn from these men's experience, and that's
Yeah.
absolutely soak it all in, but watch these men, watch how they, like you said, how do they find joy in even the difficulties, and that's where I think the secret to longevity and influence come from.
Yeah. And, one thing I was reminded of was we also, right before Dr. Godfrey came earlier in the month, we had another pair of pastors who came to visit us, Brother Matt Tice and Brother Neil Berkey. And they were only in for a short time, but we had such a good time with them. And I want to just thank the Lord for their friendship and their support over the years, but more importantly, just the encouragement they gave us. Um, they really just came and we might have spent most of the time just laughing. And boy, I didn't realize how much I needed that. We have a friendship from the past, but we hadn't seen each other probably nearly a decade. And uh, boy, I encourage missionaries, have friends, have pastoral friends, have missionary friends, have guys you're mentoring, guys you're being mentored by. You may be out on an island in a sense, like we are. You might be out in the desert like Josh is, but try not to stay there. Communication makes it where you do not have to be that way. And, you need good friends, you need encouragement. And the more of it you have, the easier it is to get up in the day. I even think last night, our church, our home church, Temple Baptist in Dulles, Virginia, had their Faith Promise commitment Sunday night and international dinner and all that. We were watching it. And Dr. Sisk is now in assisted living, and he had been there, I think, 33 to 34 years straight for the most
Right.
part. And now that's a transition where he can't do that. But they actually called him at the end of the service on FaceTime. And just to see Dr. Sisk still being Dr. Sisk, telling jokes, our pastor who doesn't get too emotional, just couldn't muster hardly to talk, and it just made you feel real special about how God uses people like that. And they're out there, make connections with them. And Lord will encourage you. You find, if you're a younger missionary, find an older missionary. If you're an older missionary, find an even older missionary, and find someone like Brother J.B. Godfrey to encourage you.
Yeah, don't let the downs in life get to you. It can be tough sometimes, and depending on the situation. And I'll tell you, Eric, it doesn't matter if you've got tons of missionaries around you. You can still feel
Yeah.
alone in your experience. You can be in a place like where I am, and there's barely anybody around. And I just get focused on the work, and I feel like I don't need that interaction. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I will try to intentionally call somebody. I called our director recently, and I kind of knew the answer to the question I was going to pose. So I more or less called just to have somebody else to run it by and to have that
Right.
conversation. And you're right, those things are important, whether you're surrounded by people or whether you're isolated. You know yourself, and you know what you need, and you need to develop a discipline of communication and interaction, because the negativity will really wear you down if you are not being encouraged by other men and women in the ministry who have been through it and have come out on the other side with the joy of the Lord still intact. And so, excellent. Well, I appreciate that you were able to share the 2 sessions there with Brother Godfrey and that personal testimony. I highly recommend going back and listening to those episodes. He talks about his work in Senegal. I think it was just 2 years ago. My wife and I stopped in a random town on our way to the capital to go look at this well. We had never seen it, in 13 years of serving here. I had seen signs for it, but never stopped to go look at it's this massive 1,000-year-old well. And so we drove back there, got out, and it's blocked off, so you can't really get that close because they don't want people falling in. And an old man came out after we were there for a few minutes, and he went, "Hey, do you guys, like, the first question, do you guys know JB Godfrey?" It's like, what? Just what?
What?
What? He's like,
What?
he was my neighbor 40 years ago. I said, what? And we had a good conversation. We were able to give him one of our cards where
Unbelievable.
he can go online and watch the teaching and do
Wow.
follow-up. So yeah,
Mm.
no matter where God has you, he wants to use you to make an impact. And Brother Godfrey hasn't been here for years, but his legacy lives on. So nothing you do for the
Wow.
Lord is in vain.
Amen. Well, Josh, it's sure been great to catch up with you, and I look forward to getting back on track with some podcasts. You and I both have some possible interviews in the future. I'm really excited about some that are coming down the pike in this year. Listeners, thanks for your patience. We've heard from a lot of you. We thank you for a lot of your ideas. A lot of those ideas we haven't forgotten. We put our families and our ministries first, and this is something we get to do extra. But when we do it, we enjoy doing it. I think, speaking of talking about relationships, I'm thinking back just a little over a year ago, Josh, we got to hang out together. That was so awesome, and I've enjoyed this number of years. It's amazing how many years are going on. But thank you for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast. Please share it with others. If you have more ideas, send them our way. We love to hear what's resonating with you, what kind of interviews you've enjoyed, and maybe ones you want to hear in the future. Josh, what do you have for us in conclusion?
In conclusion, just do what Erik just said. So yeah, that's not much else. No, I'm looking forward to some of the interviews and hoping to make some exciting connections here. And like you said, hey, if this podcast has been a blessing and there's a topic we haven't touched on and you'd like to hear about, whether you're a missionary, a pastor, or a church member, reach out to us at missionaryperspectivepodcast@gmail.com, or maybe it's just missionaryperspective@gmail.com. Just send us a message. Just try to find us. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube.
Pretty easy to find.
Yeah, pretty easy to find. Send us a message and we'll try to touch on one of those topics. So thanks so much for tuning in. This is Josh Mead from over here in Senegal.
Erik in the DR. Goodbye.
God bless. Bye-bye.